Every 4 years, the world stops. Offices go quiet, flights get rescheduled, sleep becomes optional. People who don't care about football suddenly have opinions about formations. The World Cup arrives like nothing else on Earth. And for most of the world, for billions of people, it arrives with one quiet, devastating detail. Their country isn't in it. But here's the thing nobody talks about. They watch anyway. There's a specific kind of feeling that comes with supporting a country that will never win the World Cup. And I want to be precise here because it is not sadness. Sadness is too clean. Sadness has a beginning and an end. This is something else. It is the feeling of loving something that will never love you back in the way you need it to. It is sitting in a room full of people screaming for Argentina, for Brazil, for France, and screaming with them, while somewhere in the back of your mind a small voice says, "But what about us?" It is the feeling of a fan in Lagos refreshing a phone at 2 a.m. to check a qualifier result, of a family in Glasgow passing down a story about a team that went to a World Cup and never made it past the first round, and going back next time anyway. Of a billion people in India adopting Messi as their own because football gives you no other choice. Of a nation that spent more money than any country on earth trying to buy their way into the world's most beautiful game and still couldn't score a single goal. This video is about that feeling, not about failure, about love. The most painful kind. Let me tell you something that will break your heart if you think about it long enough.
Wembley. Bobby Moore and John Gregg were the captains. England versus Scotland. Neither Bobby, his team, nor England supporters.
November 30th, 1872. Hamilton Crescent, Glasgow, Scotland. 4,000 people gathered on a cold afternoon to watch something that had never happened before. The world's first international football match, Scotland versus England. Scotland invented this. Not metaphorically, not approximately. The nation of Scotland, the people of Scotland, the clubs of Scotland, they gave the world international football. They were there at the very beginning, and in the 150 years since that day, in every World Cup ever played, Scotland has never, not once, made it out of the group stage. 9 World Cup appearances, 9 group stage exits, a record that has no equal anywhere on earth, but nothing captures what it means to be a Scotland football fan like the summer of 1978.
When he faces the Peruvians on Saturday, he did concentrate particular attention to shooting practice, and with the first game now so close, there's plenty of pressure on the Scottish players and manager Ali MacLeod.
So I miss my wife and family, which anyone would naturally do, but I'm quite happy. I'm happy with a good bunch of lads and enjoy doing it.
The manager was a man called Ali MacLeod. Charismatic, bullish. A man who walked into a room and made you believe the impossible was possible. And in the spring of 1978, he made Scotland believe they were going to win the World Cup in Argentina. Not just qualify, win. An open-top bus was arranged. Roughly 25,000 fans filled Hampden Park to send the team off. There were bagpipers, there was an open-top bus, there was the kind of collective national joy that a country only feels a few times in a generation. The cameras caught MacLeod walking out of the tunnel at Hampden, hands in his pockets, head slightly bowed, looking less like a conqueror and more like a man who knew somewhere deep down that this party had started too early. He was right. Scotland lost to Peru, drew with Iran, then, in one of the most bittersweet moments in football history, beat the Netherlands 3-2 in their final group game, with Archie Gemmill scoring one of the greatest individual goals the World Cup has ever seen. It wasn't enough. They were already out. The team that had left to a ticker tape farewell came home to an empty airport. 20 years later, Scotland returned to the World Cup. Their official tournament song was called, I Am Not Making This Up, Don't Come Home Too Soon. They were one of the first teams eliminated. Scotland is back at the 2026 World Cup for the first time in 27 years. And somewhere in Glasgow tonight, a fan who has watched this happen 9 times before is staring at the fixture list and thinking, this time. That is what it means to love this game without reward. You always think, this time.
Indian flag first waved in London.
Now imagine you are a football fan in a country where cricket is a religion and football is the thing you love anyway. You are one of 1.4 billion people, and your country has never, not in any World Cup ever played, appeared on the pitch. Not once. This is India. Here is the part of India's story that most people don't know. In 1950, India qualified for the World Cup. Actually qualified. The other Asian teams in their group withdrew, and India had a spot at the tournament in Brazil. The All India Football Federation turned it down. The official reasons: money, administrative chaos, disagreements over the squad. There is a myth, a persistent popular myth, that India refused to play because FIFA wouldn't let them play barefoot. It is completely false. Football historians have confirmed it. The real story is simpler, and in some ways worse. India had a chance to play in the World Cup, and the people who were supposed to care the most about Indian football decided it wasn't worth the journey. In the 75 years since, India has tried to qualify 11 times, never made it past the early rounds. Currently ranked outside the top 120 nations in the world. So what do Indian football fans do? They adopt other countries, and not casually, not politely. With a devotion so complete, it rewrites the idea of what fandom even means. In West Bengal, a priest held a religious ceremony for Lionel Messi's birthday. A genuine blessing. Cakes decorated in Argentina colors. Fans making 2-hour journeys to attend. One fan told a reporter completely seriously, Messi is an emotion. In Kerala, a state where football has always been closer to a religion than a sport, World Cup season means staying up until 3 a.m., gathering in community halls, painting houses in Brazil's yellow for a team that has nothing geographically, culturally, or historically to do with Kerala. And then there is Sunil Chhetri, India's greatest ever footballer. 94 goals and 151 appearances for the national team. A number that puts him among the highest international scorers in the history of the game. On June 6, 2024, Chhetri played his last match for India, a World Cup qualifier against Kuwait, Salt Lake Stadium, Kolkata. The stands were packed with fans wearing his number 11 jersey. There were giant banners, there were songs, the match ended 0-0, India didn't qualify. Chhetri walked off the pitch for the last time, the greatest player his country ever produced, having never played at a World Cup. And in the stands, 60,000 people who loved him understood exactly what that felt like, because they had never played at a World Cup either. Here is what makes Nigeria's story different from every other nation in this video. Nigeria knows what it tastes like. June 21st, 1994, Cotton Bowl Stadium, Dallas, Texas, Nigeria's first ever World Cup game. Against Bulgaria, 21st minute. The ball rolls across the face of goal. And there, exactly where a striker is supposed to be, is Rashidi Yekini. One touch, into the net. Nigeria's first ever World Cup goal. What happened next became one of the most iconic images in the history of the tournament. Yekini didn't run to his teammates. He didn't turn to the crowd. He ran straight into the net, grabbed the white mesh with both hands, and screamed. Not in celebration, in something bigger than celebration, in release, in relief, in pride, in the weight of everything his country had carried to get to that moment. Nobody else ran to him immediately. He was alone in the net, shaking it, screaming at it like a man who had just won a war and needed a moment before he could face another person. That image of Yekini holding the net, said Roger Milla, Cameroon's World Cup legend. It was like all of Africa was crying with joy. That Nigeria team was extraordinary. J.J. Okocha, Finidi George, Nwankwo Kanu, Uche Okechukwu, Daniel Amokachi. They beat Bulgaria 3-0. They went through the group stage. They lost to Italy in the round of 16, 2-1, in a match they could easily have won. The world looked at Nigeria and said, they are coming. 30 years later, Nigeria is not at the 2026 World Cup. They lost on penalties to DR Congo in the playoffs. Victor Osimhen, one of the best strikers on earth right now, couldn't save them. Frank Onyeka gave them the lead after 3 minutes. Then it slipped away. Penalties and out. For the first time since before 1994, Nigeria will miss back-to-back World Cups. A generation of extraordinary players, Osimhen, Lookman, Iwobi, may never play on football's biggest stage. And somewhere in Lagos, a father who was there in 1994, who watched Yekini grab that net and scream, is trying to explain to his son why the Super Eagles aren't on the television this summer. The son asks, will we be there next time? And the father, who has been asking that question his whole life, says what Nigeria fans always say. Of course. And then there is China. 1.4 billion people, the world's second largest economy, one of the most powerful governments on earth, one World Cup appearance in 2002 where they lost all 3 games, scored 0 goals, and finished last. On October 7, 2001, China beat Oman 1-0 in a qualifying match. 1 goal by a midfielder from a mid-table domestic club. And the reaction in China was one of the most extraordinary sporting celebrations you will ever see. Fans flooded the streets of every major city. Fireworks, parades, millions of people watching on screens, celebrating something that most nations take completely for granted. They had qualified at the tournament. China lost to Costa Rica, Brazil, and Turkey. They didn't score. They went home and the fans said, and this is the part that matters, they said they were proud, even then, even without a goal. Then came the plan. President Xi Jinping, a genuine football fan, announced 3 wishes for Chinese football. Qualify for the World Cup, host the World Cup, win the World Cup by 2050. And in pursuit of that dream, China did something extraordinary. Between 2015 and 2017, Chinese football clubs spent more money in the transfer market than any other country on earth. More than England, more than Spain, more than Germany, France, and Italy combined. Carlos Tevez was signed to Shanghai Shenhua on reported wages of 730,000 euros per week, the highest salary in world football at the time. Oscar left Chelsea for Shanghai for 60 million euros. The money was staggering, unprecedented, historic. Today, China's men's national team is ranked 94th in the world, lower than when the spending started. They are not at the 2026 World Cup. In the most expensive football experiment in history, one of the most powerful nations on earth still cannot buy a World Cup goal. Because it turns out, and this is one of football's great democratic truths, you cannot manufacture the thing that makes a football nation great. You cannot spend your way to a country that believes So, Scotland, India, Nigeria, China, 4 completely different wounds, 4 completely different relationships with the most popular game on earth. But here's what all 4 of them share. Every single one of them still watches. Think about that. Think about what it takes to keep watching, keep caring, keep showing up, for qualifiers, for friendlies, for tournaments you aren't in, when the game has never given you the thing you actually came for. The casual fan, the one who picks a winner every 4 years and moves on, will never understand what that costs. But if you're watching this right now, I think you might. Because here's what I believe about football fans who support countries that will never win anything. They are not the losers of this game. They are the proof of what this game actually is. When a kid in Kerala paints his house yellow for Brazil, a country he will never visit, whose language he doesn't speak, whose players don't know he exists, that is not embarrassing. That is the most honest thing in football. It is love with absolutely nothing expected in return. When Sunil Chhetri walked off that pitch in Kolkata in a 0-0 draw, having given 19 years to a team that never made it to the tournament he spent his life chasing, and the 60,000 people in that stadium gave him a standing ovation, that was not failure. That was devotion in its most complete form. When Rashidi Yekini grabbed that net and screamed, alone, shaking the mesh with both hands, crying out something his teammates couldn't even hear, he was not just celebrating a goal, he was releasing 30 years of a nation's longing. And when a Scottish fan sits down this summer in a pub in Edinburgh or Glasgow or Aberdeen to watch their team play in only their 9th World Cup, knowing the history, knowing the heartbreak, knowing exactly what is likely to happen, and pulls on the dark blue shirt anyway, that is not stubbornness, that is faith. The World Cup belongs to the teams that win it. Yes, but it lives in the hearts of the ones who never do. And if you have ever watched a tournament where your country wasn't playing, and found yourself screaming at a television for a team that isn't yours, in a language that isn't yours, for a dream that was never really yours to have, then you already know. Football was never really about winning. It was always about this. This is The Third Man. We tell the stories football almost forgot. If this one stayed with you, subscribe, share it with someone who understands, and drop a comment below. Tell me, which country are you supporting this World Cup when yours isn't there?